Maverick News presents The Rick Walker Show. Defrag your mind.
I can reassure the members of the committee that our banking system is sound and that Americans can feel confident that their deposits will be there when they need them. This week's actions demonstrate our resolute commitment to ensure that our financial system remains strong and that depositors' savings remain safe. Now,
do you believe that? Confidence is everything. I'm back. Thanks for coming back to join everyone here. Welcome, Maverick family. Welcome back to the Maverick News Channel. For those of you who know, I am Rick Walker, and those of you who don't know, I'm Rick Walker. And we have a lot to talk about tonight. Not the least of which is the Senate Finance Committee. Today, where Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said just what you heard, reassuring the public that the American banking system is sound, that your money is safe. But the turmoil continues. We'll hear a little bit more from the committee hearings today, and we'll also go out to the Maritimes in Canada. That's where the National Citizens Inquiry into the pandemic kicked off today, and there has been riveting testimony there. So I'm sure that that will have you on the edge of your seat. And it is breaking new ground and drawing attention to the very concerns that led to millions of people losing their jobs, having their lives overturned, having people discriminated against, prevented from going into restaurants, preventing people from gathering, seeing loved ones exercising their right to patronize retail establishments, pitting friends against friends, family members against family members. It turned our world upside down, didn't it? And it's still topsy-turvy. So we'll go out to the NCI inquiry and pick up that testimony as well. We'll also show you that footage of the Russian fighter jet coming to intercept that U.S. drone. The Pentagon has released video of that. And we have other things to show you tonight as well, but those are the top stories tonight. So let me take a brief break, and when we come back, we'll follow up with more from Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen.
Maverick News. Fighting for freedom. Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News. Maverick News. Defending free speech. Free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching. Fear not the storm, for truth is on our side. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Okay, more with Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen now.
Of all the cabinet members to come to hearings, and I just want you to know that I appreciate it. You seem quite fearless about coming into the lion's den, and we're always grateful to have you. You spoke recently to the Climate Financial Risk Advisory Committee, and in your remarks, you pointed out that climate change will likely become a source of shocks to the financial system that would lead to declines. This would be precipitated by declines in asset values that could cascade through the financial system, which is a warning that Freddie Mac has also made with respect to coastal property values. You added that rising insured losses could cause insurers to pull back from high-risk areas with potentially devastating consequences for property values. We just had a hearing in my budget committee on wildfire risk causing that effect to insurance and property markets. And before that, coastal flooding and storm risk causing that effect in insurance and property markets. And then that the whole thing can spill over to other parts of our interconnected financial system. Again, part of what Freddie Mac warned about, that it would be worse than 2008. We also heard testimony that the coastal property value crash risk and the wildfire property risk could perfectly well happen at the same time. It's not a question of one or the other. They could both come to pass. So we all know that shocks and panics and collapses and disorderly transitions are notoriously hard to predict as to exactly when they will occur. They're far easier to predict as to what their level of severity will be should they occur. And my question to you, setting aside timing, how serious to the US economy could the economic shocks that you warned of in that speech be?
So I don't know how to quantify that for you, but I do believe these are very serious risks. The Financial Stability Oversight Council is prioritizing, analyzing those risks, and has recognized that they pose a systemic threat to American financial stability. The regulators, the banking regulators, FHFA, are all taking steps to analyze the way in which these risks could affect the financial system, financial institutions, and we created the committee that you referred to in order to bring expertise into this enterprise. But I think it's critically important, and these are
Potentially deadly serious
risks, very severe risks.
And just for people who are not familiar with this particular arena, the word systemic risk sounds like a rather mild and inoffensive term, but it actually refers to pretty devastating stuff, does it not?
Yes, that is what systemic refers to, exactly. Yeah. Things that could cascade throughout the financial system and have severe consequences for financial stability and the economy.
Thank you. In the time that I have left, I wanted to flag for you a letter that I will put into the record now, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Objection so ordered.
that a great number of us on this committee signed to the acting director of FinCEN. The chairman was a signatory of it. Senator Grassley was a signatory of it. Senator Warren was a signatory of it. And we are concerned that the development of the beneficial ownership rule has been far less than we had hoped and far less than we believed the actual statutory language directed, both regarding the so-called access rule, which is the subject of the letter, and regarding the verification standard, and regarding the court order requirement. If you would be good enough to take this back to your team and make sure that you have a look at this and make sure that you approve of where they are going, because I believe they have missed a very significant opportunity to significantly strengthen our battle against kleptocracy with the rather weak way in which these three parts of the rule have been rolled out. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's for under advisement.
Thank you. I take it that way.
Janet Yellen. So there she is trying to reassure the public, bolster confidence in the face of a real crisis. I don't think we've seen the end of it. It's more serious than she's letting on. Her job is to keep people calm. Her job is to keep confidence high. What else is she going to say? When they acknowledge there's a problem, you know there's an even more serious problem than they're acknowledging. That's why just weeks before, we were getting reports that the economy was not just sound, but robust. Biden keeps talking about a strong economy, job creation. And then we get this. This is being blamed on poor management, on deregulation, on Donald Trump. The problems are more serious than that. Make no mistake. And the reaction from government, while predictable, sends bad messages. Messages that distort the market, the financial markets. It teaches bad lessons. Because it shows people in the financial industry, shows the people in the banking industry, shows the public that no matter what happens, the deposits will always be there. The banks will basically be bailed out. And even though they're saying that this is not a bailout, they'll bail it out. Even though they're telling you that taxpayers won't need to pay for it, we'll end up paying for it. At least U.S. taxpayers will, and indirectly, the whole world will, because those expenses will be passed along through the economic chain, the supply chain, the financial chains, all through the world economic system. In one way or another, we all end up paying for this. So make no mistake about that. We're going to take another quick break, and when we come back, we'll go to Nova Scotia and pick up that National Citizens Inquiry into the pandemic. Don't go away.
Maverick News. The world is watching.
Okay, just hang on a second here. I'm just trying to get you a better screen layout. Let me just roll another promo for a moment, and I'll see if I can get it worked out better for you.
Fighting the Great Reset. By leading the Great Resistance. Maverick News. The antivirus programs for your mind.
The New World Order. Government overreach. The Great Reset. Mainstream media lies. Now more than ever, independent voices are needed. Donate now at freedomreporters.com. That's freedomreporters.com. Maverick News. The antivirus program for your mind.
Okay, this is the best screen layout that we have, I guess. So we'll have to make do with this. This is we're going to pick up day one of the National Citizens Inquiry into the COVID-19 pandemic in Canada, and yeah, we'll just get these introductory remarks from the people at the inquiry, and there was some incredible testimony from some of the people about what had happened to them after receiving the vaccine.
Good afternoon. My name is Allison Steves. Like Chess, I'm a non-practicing lawyer, a member of the Nova Scotia Bar.
Thank you. Do you affirm that you will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Can you please state your name for the record?
Yeah, my name's Chet Chisholm.
And Chet, where are you from?
I'm from Antigonish, Nova Scotia.
And what is your occupation?
I am a paramedic, and I've been a paramedic for 12 years.
For 12 years?
12.
20. And how do you like being a paramedic?
Oh, it's the best job in the world, man. It's probably one of the most rewarding professions that you can ever work. Like you show up on people's worst day, and like your goal is to improve it. No one's ever mad that the paramedics show up. Well, some are, but not many. And like with everything that's happened, like if I had a lot of friends and colleagues say like, hey, if you could go back and do it all again, would you? And my answer has always been, yeah, I'd go back, and I'd have done it sooner.
So back in March 2020, when we started hearing about COVID, were you working as a paramedic at that point?
No, I was currently off work. I was off with workers' compensation. In March of 2019, I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder and was placed off on medical leave awaiting treatment.
Were you planning to return to work eventually?
Yeah, that was the hope. My mental health team was pretty keen on getting me back to work because I was gung-ho to get into treatment, get back on the trucks, and kind of what was looming on the horizon, and the state of EMS in Nova Scotia felt imperative to do so.
Did you receive the treatment that you were waiting for?
No, I was on deck to get what's called EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprogramming, which is often used very well with PTSD, and they see a lot of success with first responders and veterans. And my first appointment was kind of like the meet and greet appointment, and to kind of set up a rapport, was the first day of lockdown. So we showed up, we talked about what we were going to do, and that was it. Everything got canned thereafter, and then I was put into limbo and wasn't seen again for close to another year because we weren't allowed to have any in-person appointments whatsoever.
So you did get the treatment after a year?
No, I went from a psychologist to working with a counselor, and we were kind of doing like the prep stages, building the rapport, getting a background of what was going on. And we'd get a little bit of momentum, and then they'd say, well, you can't meet in person again. And EMDR is an in-person thing. And so we'd have to just kind of do talk therapy on the phone and discuss things and talk about stressors. But like we never got into a groove of things. And it was on and off, up until probably late spring, early summer of 2021, where things just kind of got canned again, and I got put back into the wait list and waiting in limbo, where we continue to sit.
And what impact would you say that the delay in this treatment had on you?
I've certainly had relapse into some of my PTSD symptoms that I've had previously somewhat under control, and not being able to kind of like, not because you kind of need to do maintenance while you're working through this, and we couldn't do any of that. And like being in person and actually being able to connect with somebody and talk about these things and work through it and then actually build to a therapy is incredibly beneficial. There's such a disconnect when it's on the other end of a phone or on a screen. And not only that, but like my counselor was getting extremely frustrated because she's like, you are primed and pretty well primed and ready to go. And we can get you back on the trucks and get you going. But like this keeps getting in the way. And so it's like we always had to keep starting from scratch again.
So are you still on leave from the same job?
Yes, I'm still on leave. And due to the time frame that I've been off, with our contractual agreement with the union, because the clock has ticked down, I've been terminated from my position at EHS.
So you're only allowed to be off for so long with an injury before you become terminated?
So at 2 years, they'll hold your full-time position for 2 years. So that time frame ran out, and as we'll get into it in a little bit here. That's when like we needed to push for this so I don't lose anything else. And at the 3-year mark, you're canned. And that's it.
So
you lose all your seniority and everything.
Do you have reason to believe that had you received the treatment in the time frame it was originally scheduled, you would have returned to work in time to avoid losing your job?
Pretty well everyone in my mental health team was pretty keen. Like, yeah, pretty sure Chet's going to go right back on the trucks. He wants to be there. And like there's been such a high success rate with this with other first responders. But yeah, it was looking good. Not so much.
So during the time you were awaiting treatment, did you take the vaccine against COVID-19?
Yeah, there was a push for it from our employer. And initially I declined because I was eligible in December of 2020 and January of 2021. Because I was off work, I'm a young guy, pretty healthy. I said, no, thanks. I'll wait. Like if we're going to give it to anybody, give it to people who are vulnerable and whatnot. I don't need it right now. But when it became available for people in my age group, for people in their 30s, I got my first shot on May 21st. And for the reasons is we work with the most vulnerable people at the most vulnerable point in their life. And we are in constantly different clinical situations throughout a shift. You can start your shift in a backseat of a car in a ditch, and then you can be in an old folks home, then treating a COVID patient, and then you could be going into the ICU. It's a mixed bag every time you go to work. And so the likelihood that I'm going to get a lot of exposure to COVID is quite high, and it's going to be in the back of an ambulance, and it's going to be probably right in my face. So the hope was that this could help mitigate cross exposure amongst vulnerable sectors.
So you didn't feel coerced to take it?
Yes and no. It's a little annoyed with kind of like the push. It's like, hey, you got to do this. You got to do this right now. But I wasn't ever angry at the point of getting it, because like if it did what they said it did on the tin, then that could be beneficial both for myself, but more importantly for the vulnerable people whom we deal with every day.
Who administered it to you? Do you recall?
It was given to me by an RN, and that was done at one of the local pharmacies in Antigonish.
Before taking it, did they advise you of any of the risks?
The only risk that we really discussed was the risk of anaphylaxis, because I have food allergies, and so we talked about that. And it's like, hey, just hang around for like an extra like 20 minutes or so, just so we can keep an eye on you. And I've done vaccination clinics for like flu shots and stuff, so I know the whole rigmarole of, hey, we're gonna give you this, we're gonna keep an eye on you and make sure nothing happens, and then if something happens, we'll report it and take care of you.
And how did you feel after taking it?
Initially, I felt fine, but by that evening, I was pretty slack, really, really tired, and that was kind of par for the course for any other vaccines I've gotten for work or school in the past. But what kind of really drew attention to some things is I've been dealing with PTSD and crippling insomnia for years at that point, for like 2 years at that point, where I would need to take medication to sleep. And I went from not sleeping at all to sleeping most of the day to sleeping probably like 20 hours or more. And then just being incredibly sluggish and getting a little short of breath here and there. And that kind of escalated over the next few weeks.
So those symptoms persisted and increased over the next few weeks?
Yeah, they it started with like incredible fatigue, which led to shortness of breath. And then eventually I would get like a tinge of chest pain when I was laying on my back. And it ultimately built up to like my dad had taken a tree down in the yard, and I went out to help him just load a couple chunks of log in like the front of his tractor, and got extremely short of breath, had just like stabbing chest pain here just left of my sternum, which radiated into my back, and told Dad, I was like, hey, like, we gotta go to the hospital right now. Something's up. I can't say what, but there's something very wrong at the moment. And I became incredibly diaphoretic, really sweaty, and pale as a ghost.
Had you had similar symptoms in the past?
No.
So you said you went to the ER, so you consulted a healthcare provider about these symptoms.
Yeah, I was seen. I obviously went in, talked to the triage nurse, said, hey, this was going on, and was admitted, had EKGs and stuff done, and talked to like the nurse. And these are all people I work with. And they're like, dude, what do you think's going on? I was like, well, I think it's one of these things. And they're like, yeah, something's definitely up, because you never look like this. And yeah, so we did a bunch of EKGs, blood work, did my vitals. My vitals were all abnormal.
And did they find anything?
Not at the time. Like I know, like I was really hypertensive. My blood pressure was up quite a bit. I was tachycardic. But doctor didn't seem to see anything in my blood work or my EKGs, and so just said maybe it's just esophageal spasms, and set me on my way.
And did the symptoms persist after that?
Yeah, they never quite resolved. They would calm down, but they did persist. And anytime on any exertion or lying on my back, things would exacerbate. Like I'd get more short of breath. I can, again, develop more chest pain. The fatigue persisted, well, it still persists, but like I would be pretty well bedridden some days, no energy to get up and do anything. And which was entirely new. It was like a complete shift. Because I used to be up doing stuff pretty regularly, used to be in really good shape and whatnot. But so it was a drastic change.
And how many healthcare providers did you consult about these symptoms?
Well, I was admitted into the emergency room 3 times over the course of summer. There was nothing was ultimately found, aside from having abnormal vitals and just the symptoms that I presented with. The second physician that I saw in the ER kind of just shrugged and said, "Man, I don't know what's going on. You're obviously in distress. Something's up, but we can't pinpoint anything." And the third doc I saw, which would have been probably late July, he said, "I think this warrants further investigation. Like we should order some more cardiac tests, like echocardiogram, and you should follow up with your family doc, get a cardiac MRI and get a stress test and see if we can pin down what's going on." Like I don't know for sure, but like just on the way you're presenting and like what you're telling us and your vitals, like there's something here, there's something wrong, so we need to look into it. And he actually gave me like a shot of Toradol, which is a strong anti-inflammatory, which took the edge off for maybe a couple hours, but again, the symptoms persist. I had discussions with my family physician, who was often very dismissive and abrasive about my concerns. And I've had in like a yearly follow-up that I had with WCB, because we have a follow-up every year where physician comes in and talks to you, and it's like, "Hey, how's your PTSD going? What are the symptoms you're having?" And we talked about that, and then we talked about this, and he's like, "Yeah, based on your history and like kind of the cycle of symptoms, like there's something going on here, and we should look into it."
Did you, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Did you ask any of these physicians if there could be a link with the COVID-19 vaccine?
I don't think I ever asked if there was a link, but like when they asked, "When did this start?" I told them like I didn't feel good after getting the vaccine, and it hasn't let up since. But I don't think we ever like specifically honed in. Like I suspected it, but do I know for sure? Absolutely not.
So they couldn't find anything objectively wrong to explain your symptoms, and they knew that they had started within close proximity to you taking the COVID-19 vaccine. Do you know if any of them filed an adverse event following immunization form?
No, there was no discussion of that whatsoever.
So they didn't ask you any more questions about that or indicate that they were concerned?
No, not whatsoever.
How did they respond when you mentioned that it was in relation to the vaccine?
It wasn't really discussed, or it was just kind of glazed over. Like some of the nurses expressed more concern, like when they asked me, and it's like I had colleagues, like other paramedic colleagues, who said who expressed their concern just with the timing and kind of some of the things that they had seen on calls that they had been discussing with me as well.
And have you shared your concerns about a link between your symptoms and the vaccine with others?
Yeah, I've spoken to numerous family and friends and colleagues. You get a mixed bag of the way people react. I've had people call me an anti-vaxxer, far-right conspiracy theorist, and every other nasty thing under the sun. But then I've had others who've come to me and said, "This is what happened to me. This is what my family members experienced." I've had medic colleagues come to me and say like, "Hey man, we were talking about what might have happened to you in the hallway," and like the other crew that was there was talking about like how they had like 3 kids who had like myocarditis and POTS and stuff coming in through 911. We don't see kids in EMS very often, and so like that was concerning. But yeah, it's been a mix. Like I've had friends who have since abruptly stopped talking to me whatsoever, and I've been approached, and like I've talked about this publicly and my concerns and and I've talked about some of the problems that we're having in EMS right now. And I've had people like from across the country thank me for speaking about these things. Recently, I had somebody reach out and said, like you and I have never met, but like I know who you are because you helped someone in my family on a 911 call, and they still talk about you years later. Like, thank you for doing this. Thank you for talking. Thank you for your service, and I'm sorry for what you're going through.
So you had concerns that these might be related to the vaccine. Your first dose, did you end up taking the second dose?
No, I did not.
And in October 2021, when Nova Scotia implemented the vaccine passport policy and several mandates, how did this impact your life?
Well, because I'm not vaccinated enough. I was banned from restaurants. I wasn't allowed to access some different services, couldn't go to the gym. Not that I was feeling well enough to do so anyway. When I went in to pick up like the results from my echocardiogram and copies of my blood work and EKGs from the hospital, I was stopped at the door and said, "You can't come in." And it's like, I'm picking up blood work, man. I guess got to go around the corner. And it's like, no, you need to be double vaccinated to come in here. And it was a back and forth for about a good 20 minutes. Just explaining, it's like, I'm here because we're investigating, trying to determine if something has happened with results as a result of this. And I need to get that paperwork so we can figure out what happened, if anything. And eventually they're like, just let him go in. He's just got to go around the corner. It's like 30 feet. And then like one of the worst things is one of my best friends was diagnosed with cancer during the pandemic. And because I haven't taken the shot twice, I wasn't allowed to go see him when he was dying in the hospital. I never got to say goodbye to one of my best friends because you're not vaccinated enough, so you're not allowed in here. And like, as many people know, the vaccine mandate for healthcare providers is still in effect. So even if I do get a clean bill of health and my PTSD is, wiped clean and we're good to go, I'm still banned from going back to work. Not allowed to go.
Chet, do you have any final words about the impacts of the COVID-19 measures on your life?
Yeah, like it's had a significant impact, not only on my mental health, but like my physical health, like that's associated with PTSD as well. And like you can see, like just with the way EMS is right now in Nova Scotia, morale is plummeting every day. Since the start of like 2020, we have lost 331 paramedics from the workforce. That's 1/4 of the paramedics who work for EHS. We've since hired some new people, but like these are people who are fresh out of school, and like they don't have experience. Like even on my rotation, there's like 4 of us on my rotation that are either been put off on injury or PTSD, and like there's like 60 years between the 4 of us, and that's gone. And you can't get that back. And it's infuriating, and it's also detrimental to like the well-being of everybody in this province, that like there's people like me, and I'm not the only one who's in this situation, who want to go back to work and who would like to help and who would like to fix the problem as the EMS system is crumbling, but we're told no. Like I've even spoken to Michelle Thompson, and the answer is, that's the policy, we're sticking with the policy. And if you haven't seen the what the medical exemptions are to opt out for healthcare providers, is you need to either have blood clots, myocarditis or pericarditis, a stroke, or have an allergic reaction, all of which have to be as a result to the first shot. So you have no medical exemption. It's take it or else you're let go. Or if you have an adverse event, you're probably not going to be working again anyway.
Thank you. That's all my questions.
Problem.
The commissioners have any questions? Okay.
Go.
We're going to continue to roll with this. We'll hear from the next witness.
Thank you for attending as a witness, Mr. Outsell. Do you affirm that you will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Outsell. Where are you from, sir?
I just live in Grand Lake, Nova Scotia, which is
Right.
about 40 minutes from here.
And who do you live there with?
Just in the backyard in a small cabin at my parents for now, but I'm building a house for my family. So.
Nice. For your family, you said?
Yep, my wife and small daughter. She's 14 months old.
And are you employed?
Yeah, I work for Canadian National Railway.
What do you do there?
I'm a track maintainer, so I make sure the tracks are safe for the trains to run, and we repair any defects and change rails and stuff like that.
And how long have you been employed with CN Rail?
6 years. It'll be 6 years this year.
And what policies or mandates did CN Rail adopt during the COVID crisis days?
November 2021, they implemented the vaccine mandate. And if you weren't vaccinated, you were off paid, off work for forever, basically.
And so what was the deadline that employees were given to vaccinate by?
The deadline was November 15th, 2021.
And did you receive notification of that directly from your employer?
Yeah, I received it from my supervisors and my managers and emails as well, work emails.
Okay. And you brought in with you today as an email dated September 8, 2021 from CN Communications stating that there was a vaccine mandate that would be effective as of November 1st, 2021.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. And that will be marked as an exhibit. And so what happened after that?
Well, basically, I was very much against taking any shots because I saw what was happening to my coworkers after the vaccines, and they were getting sick, they weren't feeling well.
Mm-hmm.
And I really held my stand up until I was becoming a new father and I had to put food on the table for my family. So I decided to bite the bullet, and on November 13th, I took the first shot.
Okay. And to clarify, did the timeline for vaccinating remain November 1st, or was it extended?
It was extended. It was November 1st, and then I just kept not getting it, and then they extended it to November 15th, and then on the 13th, I took the shot.
Okay. And so just to confirm, Mr. Outsell, you brought in with you today an email dated October 14, 2021 from CN Rail indicating that the mandatory vaccine deadline was extended to November 15th. And what you're saying is on the 13th, you went ahead and got your vaccination.
Yeah.
All right. And did you do so feeling coerced or pressured?
Definitely. I was getting phone calls daily from supervisors and everybody, and telling me that after the 15th, you can't come to work and you'll be off pay. So.
All right. And so were they indicating that they were going to terminate you or put you on leave without pay?
They weren't clear with it. They said either you're terminated or you're going to be off pay, basically laid off. So I wasn't sure what was going to happen. So I just.
And so what happened on November 13th when you had your vaccination? Where did you go?
I went to be honest, I don't remember the location, but it was just a walk-in clinic, and a nurse vaccinated me. So.
All right. And do you know that it was a nurse?
Yeah, as far as I know.
Did she tell you she was a nurse?
She did not, but I guess it's just my assumption.
Okay. Do you know the batch number of your vaccine?
No, I could look it up, but
okay.
I don't know it right now.
Were you made aware of any of the potential risks associated with vaccinating?
Yeah, I was aware from my own research before.
No,
that,
actually, sorry to
yeah.
cut you off. I mean, did the person who administered the vaccine have any discussion with you about the risks associated with the vaccine?
Yeah, she actually told me that for guys my age, there is a potential risk of having heart problems. And she said, oh yeah, if you have any heart issues, just go to the doctor's office. They'll give you some drugs and make you feel better. And I was like, okay, that sounds pretty good. But
All right.
I didn't want to take it, but I still did.
It didn't sound overly serious in
No.
your view?
No, it was like, why are you guys making me take this if there's risks? And I'm perfectly healthy, right? So.
And so what, if any, symptoms developed following the first vaccination?
Well, first of all, a week after my vaccine, I got seriously ill, just with a very bad flu. And I was basically out for a week. And then 2 weeks following my vaccination, I started to develop heart pain and heart palpitations, shortness of breath, weakness, and I didn't feel good at all. I felt like I knew something was wrong, especially with my chest. I kept getting stinging chest pain.
Okay. And had you had any of these kind of symptoms before in your life?
Never.
No. And how old are you, Mr. Ansel?
Right now I'm 26.
And so how old were you when you got this vaccine?
I would have been 25 years old.
And so what did you do when you started experiencing these heart pain symptoms?
Well, I went to the emergency room at Cobequid Health Center, just did a walk-in emergency, and they checked my vitals, they took my blood, they made sure I wasn't having a heart attack, and basically sent me on my way.
Did you have any discussion with them about whether this could be vaccine related?
Yeah, I did. I told them this all started after the vaccine. I never had any issues with my heart or anything like that, and they just said, "Oh yeah, like whatever, you're good. You know, you don't have a heart attack." So.
Okay. And was there any discussion about completing a vaccine adverse event form?
No, I never heard anything about that.
So as far as you know, that was never completed by the doctors? And what happened after that?
After that, I just I went home and I kept going to work. I kept fighting the pains, and then I decided to go to my family doctor as well. And I told him what was going on after the vaccine, that I was having chest pains and shortness of breath. And same thing with him. He said, no, it's probably not from the vaccine. You gotta just don't smoke anything, don't drink anything, and you'll be fine. And I tried that. Symptoms never went away. So.
Okay. And did your doctor or your family doctor have a discussion with you about whether or not to fill out an adverse event form?
No, he never had any discussions about that.
And your doctor didn't feel that there was any connection between the vaccination and the symptoms you were having?
No, he did not. No.
And so what happened after that?
After that, I went in again to my family doctor. I told him, listen, I'm going to lose my job if I don't get the second shot. And I didn't really want to get it at all, obviously. And I asked him, can you fill out a medical exemption for me? And he said, no, I can't do it without any proof. So I just said, all right, I guess I'll be laid off. And then I went in again. I think it was my third time. He finally referred me to a cardiologist to get an MRI. And then.
Okay. And so then did you go and see a cardiologist?
Yeah, I went and saw the cardiologist. They scanned my heart and did all the tests. And it turned out that the outer lining of my heart was inflamed, and I had pericarditis, myocarditis. And the cardiologist said, this is from the vaccine.
Okay. And so who was the cardiologist that you saw?
His name is, 1 second, sorry.
Well, you're
Dr. Douglas Hussein Beydoun, that was his name.
Okay, Hussein Beydoun, Beydoun. And you brought with you today a letter from Dr. Beydoun dated February 11, 2022. Do you have that in front of you?
Yep, I've got it right here.
And would you look at page 2?
Yep.
And just read the first line at the top of that page.
very likely Mr. Anselm has pericarditis, myocarditis, post-mRNA vaccine, and the echocardiogram done today was normal. In the view, the symptoms improved significantly. I would not start anti-inflammatory therapy. Any change, please let me know, and I will be happy to reassess him. I would
Okay.
not recommend him for a second dose, and I am copying this to my colleague.
All right. And so, Mr. Anselm, you received that exemption to not have to take the second dose, correct?
That's
From
correct.
the stuff. All right. And let's go back to your employment. Had you been working through this at this point?
No, it turned out I just had a kid, so I was able to get the parental benefits,
All
even
right.
though I was laid off. So that kept me going, luckily.
Okay,
for
so
a
you
bit.
were on parental leave
Yeah.
during this period.
Yeah.
And what happened with respect to the exemption that you had? Were you able to use that to return to work?
No, I was still kind of pissed off. I didn't really want to talk to anybody. And yeah, and then my manager called me in July. He said the mandates were dropped and you can return to work. I said, all right, I'll take my whole leave until September and then I'll come back to work. So September 2022 is when I returned to work.
And so there was no period where you had to return to work prior to the mandates being dropped?
Yeah, that's correct.
You
Prior to
remained
that.
off on your parental leave?
That's correct.
Did you have any conversation with them during that period when you were on parental leave as to whether or not they would take you back with the exemption?
No, I did not.
Okay.
I just didn't even want to bother for now.
Okay. How has your heart condition impacted your life?
It's impacted me in every aspect of my life. Physically, I can't really do the things I used to anymore, like with less vigor. Mentally, I was just full of regret and made me kind of a less of a father, not less of a father, but mentally I was down and it impacted my fatherhood. And mentally, physically, everything. So.
Okay. All right, thank you. Those are all my questions, and we'll just pause for a moment to see whether the commissioners have any questions.
You said that you had worked with CN Rail, I think you said 6 years?
Yep, 6 years. Yep.
When you signed your contract with CN Rail, your employment contract, was there a clause in there requiring that you had to take whatever vaccines that they might require in the future?
No, there was none of that. So in my eyes, it's illegal what they did. So.
All right, thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Anselm.
Looking for Cassandra. There she is.
You're not sure who she is?
Yep, she's coming right there.
That's what you need a court crier for, see?
Yeah. That's right.
They go out and shout in the corridors.
Come on up, Cassandra.
Cassandra, do you affirm that in the evidence you will give this commission, you will tell the truth the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
As a child of God, yes, I do.
Thank you. Cassandra, would you please give us your full name?
Cassandra Marie Murray
Where do you live, Cassandra?
in Halifax, Nova
Yep.
Scotia.
Halifax. And what do you do for a living?
I am a teacher.
Fabulous. Where do you teach?
Currently, I just teach privately. I used to teach, though, in a private school.
Okay. Which private school or school were you teaching at?
You want me to name the school?
Well, let's just say private school is fine.
Private school, yeah, it was a private school
Within
in
the
Halifax.
Halifax district, is that
Yes,
correct? Okay,
yes.
there we go. And how long were you teaching at that private school?
At school, I was there for I think 3 years
3 years at that school?
at that
And
school.
how long were you a teacher overall? How long have you been
Over
a
20
teacher?
years.
20 years. So some significant experience there.
Correct.
And what grades or grade did you teach?
At the time, at that school, I was teaching a grade 1-2 split
Grade 1 to so that would make the kids about how
from
old?
anywhere from 6 to 8 years old.
6 to 8 years old. When the mask requirements came in, you have a mask exemption from a physician, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. How was your experience getting that exemption?
From my physician?
Yes.
My physician was really good about it, actually. I went in there and I explained to him why I didn't want to wear a mask, what I felt, how it would impact my health, and he had no problem giving me the exemption.
Fantastic. Did the school respect that exemption?
For a short while, but with there was a lot of toxic and harmful like situations I was put in, like hostile. Was a lot of toxic and harmful like situations I was put in, like hostile environment that I was put in because I had that medical exemption.
Okay, can you give me an example of such a hostile act that they took towards you?
Sure. When I first came in with the exemption, they were not really happy about it. They put it on file, though, so that it was well documented that I had it. And they said that because I wasn't wearing a mask, that I had to, well, they say I was segregated, but I'm saying I was segregated to use a different bathroom. I wasn't allowed to use the same bathroom as the rest of the faculty. I had to use a bathroom that was in the basement, very clean, and was like, the school had a mold issue, which I was working on with my lungs too. And so that didn't help it at all. And so I had to use the bathroom in the basement. And so every time I had to go to the bathroom, I had to children run down the stairs, go to the bathroom, come back up, and come back into this. I also wasn't allowed to use the faculty room where they took their breaks. I had to go in a small closet that was right beside my room that we used to use, a hubby room. And it was about maybe, I don't know, maybe about feet wide by about 20 feet deep. There was no ventilation in this room, just the door going out to the hall. So often when I would go into that room during break time, during my breaks, I would have to leave the door open to the hall just so I could get some air, fresh air in there. That room was used that if children were sick, then they would have to go and be put in there. And if that was the case, that I couldn't be in there and I needed to leave the building. So rain or shine, that's where I was. Then the other piece was I couldn't use the bathroom. I couldn't use the faculty room.
Can you tell me about potential meetings, faculty
Yes.
meetings potentially?
Yeah, so even though I wasn't allowed to use the faculty room, I had to stay 6 feet away from everybody. At a faculty meeting, I was allowed at the faculty meeting where everybody was in the same room and they were 6 feet apart. And I wasn't wearing a mask, and some of the other faculty members would also take off their masks. And I was allowed in that, but I wasn't allowed in the other situations.
So you were able to, and please correct me if I'm mistaken, but you were able to attend faculty meetings with other faculty who were comfortable taking the masks off. Were you able to share a lunch space with that same
No.
faculty?
No, I wasn't allowed to go in that room where they were doing that.
Okay. So
And even at one time, if I may, when I was sitting in that cubby space, like that small closet, I was sitting there and I was doing some work and having something to eat. And one of the faculty members, and I was down like near the end, not near the hallway door, faculty member came by the door. She looked in and she said, "I'm going to close this door because you're breathing in there." And she closed the door. And I didn't know what to say. I said, fine. And I just, yeah.
Close the door because
Closed the door because I was breathing in there.
It's very interesting because I normally don't go into rooms and breathe.
Yeah.
I think we all have similar experiences. We all tend to breathe no matter where we go. So
Exactly.
unless it's the other place, but we won't go there. So,
yes.
Cassandra, how did that make you feel?
It was really traumatizing for me. It made me feel uneasy. I started seeing a psychotherapist to kind of help me through the trauma of what it was doing to me. It made me feel really isolated and cut off from faculty members that I had called friends before, that now I wasn't a friend, because I wasn't complying. And so, yeah, it was really harmful. It was really damaging to me. And then also, because it was such a toxic and I was, harassing environment, felt like I was policed all the time. They were walking by the room because I had to stay 6 feet away from the children within my classroom. And which with grade 1 and 2, which is like herding cats sometimes, it's very difficult to stay 6 feet away from them with a mask. So, I would see teachers kind of peeking in the room, like making sure there was no children around me and things like that. And it would often have parents come into my room to kind of help because the parent would mask and I would. Yeah.
To your knowledge, were any of the other teachers policed like that?
Not to my knowledge.
Cassandra, because you were in such a position of care with really the most vulnerable and now most precious treasures, children, did you have any special rituals that you would go through in the mornings to assess them somehow about their overall health or mental well-being?
Yeah, so prior to the COVID protocols, I always met my children at the door every morning and shook their hand. We look at each other in the eye, we shake each other's hand, and we say good morning to one another. And it's a good way to connect with the child. It's a good way to get an assessment of what does their hand feel like? What does their handshake like? Is it firm? Is it weak? Is it wet? Is it sweaty? Is it dry? Are they making eye contact with me? And it gives me an indication of how I can best serve that child that day. And then at the end of the day, we would also do the same thing. But that stopped with the COVID protocols. I had to get creative and inventive.
What do you mean when you say you get inventive and creative?
Because I still wanted to, because I know how harmful it is for a child to be disconnected when they're in a traumatic experience or in an environment like that where they're feeling fearful, because it was really inciting a lot of fear in the children, that to have that connection is really important because they tend to disconnect and can see that. I could see it in the class and how that was playing out with the children. So I thought I need to somehow keep this connection with the children. So I had each child get a tree branch of like some sort 6 feet long. And then we decorated the ends. One end was like a red or a pink, the other end was blue, so that we always knew what end I would shake the color and they would shake the color, so it wasn't getting mixed up, you know, and we would shake hands with the stick.
Well, at least you were able to form some sort of connection with the kids, even though the school's mandates brought in some rather ridiculous rules and procedures. Cassandra, you've been a teacher for a long time. How would you compare the learning environment that was brought in by the school system at those times versus the years prior?
Well, our faculty meetings became more and more geared towards how to police protocols for COVID and what public health was mandating. And so then our teaching became more fear-based and informed that way with the children. You know, make sure you sanitize your hands every day before we go outside the room. And if I may elaborate on that.
Please.
So one of the rules that even if the children were going out into the hall bathroom to wash their hands with soap and water, they sanitized before they went out in case they touched the walls. And they had to, like, there was one line going this way and one line going this way, like a coming and going line. So they were watching to make sure I was making sure the children self-sanitize. And what happened was one of the children came in and she had caustic burns on her hand from the sanitizer. And I thought, oh my God, this is full. Like, why are you doing this? And her parent actually went and said, I do not want my child putting sanitizer in her hands. She's fine to just wash them. So I was very grateful that that parent chimed in for that.
Absolutely. You've seen some devastating things physically on the children because of the caustic burns from the overuse of sanitizer. What about their mental state? What about their, I guess when I think back when I was a kid, not that a good thing, but you know, try to have a happy childhood, and a teacher was that connection, particularly in those very early grades, because really at the end of the day, you do become a replacement parent for little kids that are in their 5, 6, 7 years old. So, you know, you take on a bit of a motherly role. And how do you, after the precautions were brought in, how was their learning environment? How were the kids? Like, were kids being kids? Or was it, what would you compare it to?
So, prior to the protocols, the children would go to each other's desks, they would eat together, they would play games. We shared, put all our desks together for birthday celebrations. We did all of these things. So after, we weren't allowed to do that. And outside, they were supposed to be like 6 feet apart, and they weren't allowed to sing. And they weren't allowed to sing inside. And if they were singing outside, they had to sing 6 feet apart. So, the children become fearful of one another. Their self-regulation is being either stopped or it's going to be delayed because they're unsure of what to do and where they need to go. Their cognition, because there was children that were masking in the class, it wasn't mandated at that time, children to be masked, but some families wanted their children masked, and some families even had children double masked. And you can see the blood drained from their face. Like they didn't have the rosy cheeks and, you know, things like that. Could really see the difference. So their cognition, their rate of taking something in and digesting the education that they were being given, it's like eating a bad meal, right? It wasn't working. And you could see that they couldn't keep up, or they were really tired, or they got tummy aches. See a lot of that happening. And I had this special little tent in the room that I had to sanitize every time somebody came in or out of it. But at least it was a space where the child could curl up with their own little blankie and pillow and just kind of regroup a little bit in that space, a shelter. So sorry if I'm going off tangent a little bit.
We were talking about the kids. And it's very,
Yeah,
very
so
important.
you can see that this, you know, development of self-trust, development in trust in others starts to get delayed, or, you know, or impaired in some way because they're cut off. There's have sensory deprivation. You know, their sense of touch is cut off. Even their sense of hearing could be cut off if they're not hearing their friends properly, or somebody that is muffled. You know, other teachers that did come in and had a mask on, you can't properly hear tone in the voice, so you can't really comprehend what's being said to you. And then, you know, so there's a lot of sensory deprivation that was happening there. The sense of smell, taste, all of those things were slowly declining in the children that were wearing masks. And so I found that where typically I had a certain curriculum I was bringing at a good rhythm, and everybody was able to digest it. And now I really had to pull back on that. I really had to have intuitive pedagogy, right? Where you kind of have to intuit what the children's needs are and just meet them where they're at.
Absolutely. As with any school system, whether public or private, there will be learning outcomes that should be met or need to be met. So we know the kids are progressing at a set pace, if you will. Do you find that you were able to meet those learning objectives that have been set for those kids?
I would say those learning objectives were definitely delayed. Where, like I just said, where, you know, that I had a certain rhythm, you knew by this time you would be meeting these outcomes. Typically, you know, that's how it worked, but they were really pulled back, not just because of the impairment of the children being able to digest the information, but also from the onset of the unnecessary protocols that we were always told to police with the children to make sure they understood the rules, you know, and what needed to happen. So, and then trying to explain that to the children in a way that's loving and kind and warm, so that it doesn't further incite any fear. Yeah.
Absolutely. That makes perfect sense, Cassandra. I'm just going to take you back for a moment, because, you know, your colleagues certainly seem to have an extreme fear of someone that wasn't wearing a mask. How did the kids feel when you showed up in the classroom with no mask? Was there did you have to give an explanation as to why this teacher is not wearing a mask and some or the rest of the teachers are?
So with this age, typically they're part of the whole, haven't really quite come into their own self-individuality. Usually happens around the 9-year change. So at this age, their consciousness is more of, I'm part of the whole, you're part of me, I'm part of you. So there were some children that were like, Miss Cassandra, why don't you have to wear a mask? And I said, well, no, I just don't. I choose not to wear a mask. And I just didn't want to, I'm not going to get into it with the child. So, and that was the end of that. You know, I just gave them a very simple answer, and that was the end of that. So yeah, that was how that was met. But ultimately, they didn't really pay attention because, you know, like you said earlier, they looked at you like children still, like they would call you mom half the time, you know, in class, and instead of Miss Cassandra. Oh, yeah, sorry, Miss Cassandra, right? Because they're looking for that adult that, you know, is giving them, nurturing and providing them with an environment of love, and they just want to hug, come into the folds of that. And so, yeah, so there was children that would just like unconsciously just, want to naturally come up and give me a hug, kind of like hide them off to the side, right? Okay, we're not hugging, so anyway, yeah.
Wow, it's kind of frightening what happened and what mandates they brought in and imposed on our children. Because I don't really have any other questions, but is there anything that you feel you'd like to add before I defer to the
If that's
commissioners?
okay.
Please go.
Yeah. So one of the other things that had happened, just to give another picture, is the executive director, who's supposed to be impartial and fair to everyone. One day I was walking in close to the office and she was coming out of the office, which meant that we were kind of going by close to one another, and she had her mask on. She literally turned her back to me because I was walking beside her. And then after, there was a time where we all went online, and I won't even get into how detrimental that is for children, but then we went online learning. And then when we were coming back from the online learning, it was mandated that all the children and everyone within the school had to wear a mask. Even the little pre-primary ones all had to wear a mask. So they called me and they said, we can't have you come back to school. We can no longer honor your medical exemption, and we won't, and we can't have you back to school. So what we're going to do is we're going to put you on paid leave, but we're going to have a substitute teacher lead your class, and you have to provide them with lesson plans. So I did that for a few weeks, and then everybody went off online again. So then at near the end of the school year, I think it was the end of May, beginning of June, I'm not quite sure, but, and this is 2021, they were going to go back into the classroom for 1 or 2 weeks. And so they said, well, we can't have you back in the classroom. We can't honor your medical exemption, and we won't. And so unless you want to wear this helmet that was it's called a microclimate helmet. They were willing to pay over $400 for this microclimate helmet that looks like one of those old sea diver helmets. And I thought, no, I'm not. That would just, those children have enough. I am not stepping in front of those children with never mind my own trauma of having to deal with that. And I have a medical exemption. Right. So that was where I said no. And so they just kept making this environment for me at the school very toxic, very hostile, watching me all the time, all these little things adding up. And I decided that this was not in my contract. This was not the terms of my employment. My terms of employment were significantly changed. And so due to the employer's conduct, I felt forced to leave my job, and I made my decision to resign.
Fantastic. So just quickly to reiterate, so you had a valid medical exemption from a physician in Nova Scotia, and the school chose to disregard it entirely and essentially tell you, your exemption means nothing to us. So if you want to come, you put on a spacesuit, right, and teach, because that would be a wholesome environment to them.
That's correct.
Thank you very much, Cassandra.
You're very welcome.
I have a couple of short questions. You mentioned that, I believe you mentioned that still faculty meetings going on,
Correct.
and you'd attend those faculty. Some people didn't have masks on, some, and yet seemed to be okay. My question has to do with the intent content of those faculty meetings. How much time, if any, in those faculty meetings was spent discussing the protocols or masking, et cetera, versus what protocols should be in place to compensate for the things you were seeing going wrong with children, with their learning being reduced or being impeded, and some of the social issues. So my question is, how much time were they spending trying to mitigate those, coming up with protocols to mitigate the effects of the masks on the children's learning environment?
Yeah. I would bring something up to try to mitigate, and I was immediately shut down. So there was very little to none on mitigation, and I would say there was probably 1/3 of the meeting was spent on protocols, what we need to do, how we could be better. I even have like an email that was sent out by the education director. It was sent out to all the faculty, and she specifically named me in this email. And she says, for you, Cassandra, I would ask that you double up on your physical distancing and also supporting the parents who come in to support the class during transitions as well as in class time. So she, so I was really like, put in the spotlight because was a private thing for me with my medical exemption, and that was like put out through the whole school.
So I just want to make sure I understand that. They said you had to double up on your distancing.
That's what they wanted me to do.
So your distancing was 6 feet. You had to be 12 feet
They
away
wanted
from the
me
kids.
to do 12 feet.
How many kids were in the classroom?
How many did I have that year?
Approximately.
I remember, I'd say approximately 18.
So would it be possible in a classroom to be 12 feet away from 18 children?
No.
I have one other question, and maybe it's just I didn't understand something about this. I thought you said that you weren't allowed to go into the lunchroom and have lunch with the staff.
Correct.
Did they eat their lunch with the mask on?
I wouldn't know because I wasn't allowed in the faculty room.
Thank you. That's all I've got.
You're welcome.
I have two questions. One short question. You are probably have heard, I've never seen it myself because I've been out of the university and school and so on for a long time, but I've heard that there's a lot of issues in the American campus, but maybe also in some places in Canada about what the so-called safe space and microaggression. That is, people that are sensitive to opinions or behavior. And I'm trying to understand what that could represent in an environment, but with teenager or young adult, maybe this is something that can be, I don't know, managed somehow. But in a school with children like amongst adults, which are the faculty, would you compare what you lived through of something like aggression?
I know. I'm not sure how to answer that question. I know I felt segregated and I felt discriminated against. I felt, I just felt very isolated. So I don't know about the microaggression piece.
How did you felt emotionally?
Oh, emotionally, yeah, emotionally, I was really traumatized. I was really sad. And I was thinking, what am I going to do for work now? How am I going to make a living? I can't go back into that environment. They won't even let me back into that environment. So they made it very difficult for me. So So yeah, so I went into this anxious, stressful state of, fight or flight, and thinking, okay, I need to like boots in and just moving and figuring out what I'm going to do. And that's where I was really grateful that this doctor that was helping me, the psychotherapy was really helpful to help me get through that stage.
My other question, maybe you're not aware of that, but in Quebec, they actually conducted a very extensive study to look at the impact of these measures in school, in the learning process and behavior of the children and so on. Are you aware of similar study in Nova Scotia? And
I'm not aware of similar studies in Nova Scotia directly, but from some of my training in working with healing, transdisciplinary healing education, that working with educating traumatized children, right? Seeing how trauma and these things not only have mental health implications and psychotherapy indications for the children at the time, and if it's not worked out immediately, it can turn into other illnesses and disease, right? But it also can have a delay in development in their development of their organs, in the development of how they move and their growth. So there is a lot that can happen physiologically and psychologically with the children.
thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much, Cassandra. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. My apologies.
Oh, sorry.
Let me take that back for a moment.
I'm sorry.
I still appreciate your time, but we have one more question.
Yes. Sorry.
Hi, Cassandra. I just
Hi.
want to take it just a little bit bigger, broader. Who determined the protocols? Was it like external, or was it the provincial health, or was it just an internal within the private school system?
We were told that they were getting their mandates from public health. That's what we were told at the faculty meetings. And the school had put together a small group of individuals, teachers and parents, that put together what they felt were the measures and protocols that our school would be doing. So they were getting this public health from public health, they were getting whatever mandates or protocols, and then they would take that and then they would implement it in a way for our school following those guidelines. That was my understanding. That's what we were told.
Were you ever given a copy of those mandates from provincial health, or you just read about it in the media, that kind of thing?
I don't recall being given anything. Yeah, I don't recall being given anything. I just remember us being told this is what was happening. It was kind of like an agenda note, right?
Yes.
This is part of our agenda, but it didn't go into detail.
Did you see any discrepancies with what was happening within your private school as compared to other schooling alternatives in Nova Scotia? I'm not from here, that's why I ask.
Yeah. I wasn't happening in the public school system because I'm not part of that. I just knew what was happening in our private school. And I didn't know too much about what was happening in the other school systems. I was just really involved with what we were doing.
Okay, and then one final question. In terms of incident reporting, is there any reporting process within the school system for the hand sanitizer issue?
No, there was no incident reporting for that. It was the parents coming back to say, my daughter has caustic burns from this overuse of sanitizer and I don't want her using it anymore.
So there would be no path to document what was happening with that child and taking that information, sorry, I just lost my voice, I think, taking that information to the public health authorities.
That I'm aware of.
Okay, thank you.
Is there one more question forthcoming? No. We do have an audience question for you, Cassandra, as well. The question is, thinking of air quality and our scent-free schools, did the hand sanitizer have any negative impact?
As far as scent sensitivity?
Yeah, because I mean, usually I find that, and I'm going to presume that whoever's asking the question, are you talking about scented hand sanitizers? Because no,
Sentient hand sanitizer?
because they were both available, I believe, at the schools. Yes, please.
Have a smell to them. Yeah, yeah. In my class personally, I didn't notice any scent sensitivities to the sanitizer, only the physical sensitivities of rash, the burns, things like that.
Wonderful. I believe we've got all questions answered now. So thank you once again very much, Cassandra.
Thank you.
Thank you all. The hearings will rise for the day and reconvene tomorrow at 9 a.m. Thank you.
Government to this very day, even in the wake of all that Snowden reporting we did and the public anger over it. That is why that bill continues to exist. 4 years later, it was renewed again, this time in 2018. And what was remarkable about this was by 2018, Donald Trump was president. And it was very common for Democrats to call Trump a new Hitler, to warn that he was attempting to install a new white supremacist dictatorship, that he was an existential threat to the republic, all the things that we still hear and heard back then about Donald Trump from Democrats. And yet, they were able to keep this bill intact, this warrantless spying power, fully empowered with no reforms.
We're going to pull out of that. Going to take a break, and I've got some other stuff queued up. Going to go back a little bit to what's going on with the banking crisis. I've got a Peter Schiff thing set. So I don't know if you know who Peter Schiff is. He's one of my favorite economists. So don't go away.
Maverick News. Fighting for freedom.
The New World Order. Government overreach. The Great Reset. Mainstream media lies. Now more than ever, independent voices are needed. Donate now at freedomreporters.com. That's freedomreporters.com. Maverick News. The antivirus program for your mind.
We're now witnessing the great banking collapse of 2023. And you should probably buckle up because this is going to be a wild ride. The dominoes are falling faster than anyone expected. And if you thought the bank failures were over, think again. The whole system is at risk. And a new report from credit rating firm Moody's Analytics confirms that more institutions are about to crumble in the months ahead. That's what we're going to expose in today's video. But before moving on, we kindly ask you to support our work with a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. When the cryptocurrency exchange firm FTX collapsed in November 2022, that should have raised some major red flags in the financial world. But the scandal was rapidly foreshadowed by the next hard topic, and the focus was removed from the downfall that resulted in $51 billion lost in collateral. Sadly, that was only the first domino to fall, and now a cascading failure is in motion. In the last 7 days, we have seen the second and third largest bank collapses in the history of the United States. But the truth is that the demise of Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank won't be unique cases. The Federal Reserve generated a $620 billion black hole in our banking system by aggressively raising interest rates, and our quadrillion-dollar derivatives pyramid scheme is shaking right upon us. Now, policymakers are desperately trying to fix things by recklessly spraying money around when they're actually going to need a much bigger hose. The speed at which financial institutions can break down in the digital era is absolutely breathtaking. According to the Wall Street Journal, in a single day last week, $42 billion were withdrawn from Silicon Valley Bank, leaving the financial institution with $1 billion in negative cash balance, the company said in a regulatory filing. Experts say that the staggering bank runs unfolded at a pace that could only be enabled by online banking, with panic spreading on social media platforms and chat groups fueling mass withdrawals. In the day leading up to the bank's collapse, several famous investors used their Twitter accounts to warn about the threatening situation, with many of them urging startups to rethink where they kept their cash. Founders and CEOs then shared tweets about the risks facing the bank in private Slack channels. Meanwhile, on the other side of the screen, multiple startup leaders rushed to withdraw funds online. So many, in fact, that the online system went down. Still, the end result was a modern race to withdraw funds, which House Financial Services Chair Patrick McHenry later described in a statement as the first Twitter-fueled bank run. Even back in the ancient days, way before we had any form of modern communication, this stuff tended to be rumors that moved really fast. The reason it would happen is people would walk down the street and observe people standing outside of banks. Andrew Metrick, professor of finance and management at the Yale School of Management, explained. Now, we don't have to do that, but we have Twitter. You should be absolutely terrified right now. Jason Calacanis, a tech investor, wrote on Twitter, all in capital letters this Sunday, "That is the proper reaction," he emphasized, again in capital letters. Right after that, Signature Bank was also hit by a withdrawal tsunami, which then led many other regional banks to also see massive outflows, leaving the question of which banks will be the next to implode. On Tuesday, a new report by the credit ratings firm Moody's Analytics revealed some alarming information about the U.S. banking sector. In a harsh blow to an already reeling sector, Moody's cut its view on the entire banking system to negative from stable, CNBC reported. The firm said the action was a response to the key bank failures that prompted regulators to step in with a dramatic rescue plan for depositors and other institutions impacted by the crisis. We have changed to negative from stable our outlook of the U.S. banking system to reflect the rapid deterioration in the operating environment following deposit runs at Silicon Valley Bank, Silvergate Bank, and Signature Bank, and the failures of SVB and SNY, Moody's outlined in a report. The firm's move can have ripple effects because it can impact credit ratings and thus borrowing costs for the entire sector. In the report, the rating agency said that despite the extraordinary actions taken to shore up impacted banks, other institutions with unrealized losses or uninsured depositors still could be at risk. Banks with substantial unrealized securities losses and with non-retail and uninsured U.S. depositors may still be more sensitive to depositor competition or ultimate flight, with adverse effects on funding, liquidity, earnings, and capital, Moody's Analytics wrote. And the most chilling part of the report was the one where it identified 6 specific banks for potential downgrades. Moody's warned it was carefully reviewing the rates of First Republic Bank, Zions, Western Alliance, Comerica, UMB Financial, and Intrust Financial. The firm had previously cut the rating of Signature Bank, which then has been seized and turned into junk. Needless to say, we must keep a very close eye on those 6 names.
The thing that's different
And be exacerbated by ongoing monetary policy tightening, with interest rates likely to remain higher for longer until inflation returns to within the Fed's target range, Moody's said. U.S. banks also now are facing sharply rising deposit costs after years of low funding costs, which will reduce earnings at banks, particularly those with a greater proportion of fixed-rate assets. All of that is indicating that more trouble is ahead. At the moment, one of the most important international banks has just acknowledged material weaknesses in its internal controls in its latest report. Credit Suisse delayed the release of its annual report following queries from United States regulators regarding its books. The bank was supposed to publish its report in February, but it postponed the release after a last-minute call from the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission over revisions made to cash flow statements for 2019 and 2020. In the document, Credit Suisse admitted that the group's internal control over financial reporting was not effective, and management has also accordingly concluded that our disclosure controls and procedures were not effective in the latest blow to the scandal-hit bank. In the fourth quarter, bank runs led the institution to lose over $120 billion. No wonder why shares of the bank just fell to an all-time low. Credit Suisse is now down a whopping 97% since 2007. The bank has been in trouble for years, but in the second half of 2022, it hit a breaking point. Oftentimes, such complex crises just take time to fully play out. A major example of that is the fact that insiders knew that Silicon Valley Bank was technically insolvent for months before it fatally collapsed. Financial analysts at Stratechery revealed that even though the bank had more assets than liabilities, a huge chunk of those assets could not be liquidated without causing a major loss. The big loser would be Silicon Valley Bank stockholders, who would forego all of the unrealized interest on the more attractive securities the bank could not buy in the meantime, which makes us understand why the stock lost 66% of its value last year, they stressed. The problem is that we now have many other financial institutions that are technically insolvent right now, and although they may survive for a while, a day of reckoning always arrives. This is like watching a slow-motion train wreck playing out right in front of our eyes. Neither policymakers at the Federal Reserve nor politicians in Washington will be able to stop it. They're actually making things worse. A separate report by the Wall Street Journal revealed that there were private buyers for Silicon Valley Bank that emerged that could potentially have bailed out the bank and prevented this huge mess from happening. But the administration rejected those buyers. The government chose to spend taxpayer dollars to nationalize Silicon Valley Bank, while a private buyer favored by the Treasury and the Federal Reserve could have done so. Instead, the regulators offered solutions that bail out even uninsured bank depositors and other banks at unknown costs that Mr. Biden isn't acknowledging, the report highlighted. Kevin Hassett, former chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors, told Fox Business that there were buyers who were willing to step in and buy SVB, but the FDIC didn't allow that to happen. The Biden administration had a whitelist of companies that were allowed to buy the failed bank and companies that weren't. If this is true, then this is another Biden scandal, said Gravian founder Tom Elliott. The truth about this that must come out because of all the politicians that did this need to be held accountable. We must remember that we're actually the ones bailing these banks out. They're using money they confiscate from us via taxes. This situation is completely outrageous. We all have a crisis of unprecedented proportions on our hands, and now is not a time to be playing politics. We must also remember that economic activity is slowing down all over the country, and large corporations are cutting thousands of jobs every week. Just a few days ago, the parent company of Facebook, Meta, announced a second round of layoffs. Another 10,000 employees will be laid off after the company cut more than 11,000 jobs in December, reducing its workforce by 13%. Last month, Meta posted declining profits and its third quarter of decreased revenue. Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg, in a message to employees, said he made the difficult decision to make the cuts, adding that recruiting employees were expected to be impacted by the layoffs this week. We expect to announce restructurings and layoffs in our tech groups in late April and then our business groups in late May, Zuckerberg said, noting that it may take through the end of the year to complete these changes. The company will also close an additional 5,000 open roles, Zuckerberg said, and similarly, announced that it would cut about 12,000 jobs. SiriusXM Radio is cutting about 8% of its workforce. So far this year, 483 major tech companies have laid off 128,202 employees. And that's according to data compiled by layoffs.fyi, the site that has tracked tech layoffs since March 2020. In February, many more companies revealed plans to lay off their workers from all around the nation, and data compiled by Challenger Gray and Christmas, a nonpartisan research firm, shows the shocking increase in the number of job cuts that are coming in the months ahead compared to what was happening the same time a year ago. Last month, employers announced plans to cut 180,713 jobs, up by an overwhelming 427% from the 34,309 cuts announced in the same time of 2022. It is the highest total since 2009, when the U.S. economy was in the depths of the Great Recession, the firm revealed. You heard that right. 427%. If you were still in doubt whether or not this was going to turn into a major economic meltdown, this piece of statistics makes it very clear how bad the problem we're facing. Things will eventually get a whole lot worse than they are right now. That's why we encourage our viewers to get ready for the incredibly challenging times that are approaching us, because they will truly change life as we know it. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy our videos, we highly recommend End Time.
And that is the Epic Economist. And as I said, we also have Peter Schiff queued up for you. Schiff is one of my favorite economists. Where'd you go, Peter Schiff? I seem to have misplaced Peter Schiff. Come on, Peter, come on back. Where are you? That's very odd. Well, I'll have him for you in just one moment. Here he is. So Peter is I would say, kind of conservative. Kind of a free market guy for sure. Capitalist, if you will, but certainly free market. And I see very close eye to eye to him with him on most issues related to the economy. And I'm in alignment with him as well on these banking issues. Now, here he is speaking on Real America. He's been invited back on quite a number of programs in the last few days because of this SVB scandal.
Our first guest this evening is the man who sent those tweets. Chief economist and global strategist, also the founder of Shift Gold and the owner of Europac Gold. Let's welcome Peter Schiff back to the program to get some answers. Peter, welcome back. So we saw this go down late Friday. We stuck it into our Friday show, and a lot of us behind the scenes were going, this is not going to end well. This is huge. When you start looking at the tech companies that kept their money there to the tunes of hundreds of millions, and then for Joe Biden to say, yeah, it's not going to cost the American taxpayer a penny. But then I'm not a banker. I'm not an economist like you, but I do know when I signed up for my first account as a kid in my teens, the FDIC only insures $250. So if Roku says, I want 100 million of my hundreds of millions out of that bank today, can they get their 100 million? And if so, who's paying for it?
Yeah, well, first of all, it absolutely is a bailout. And even if the stockholders of these two banks are not getting bailed out, their wealthy customers are. You're talking about very sophisticated, high net worth individuals, corporations that had unsecured deposits. They should be losing, but they're not going to lose because they've been bailed out by the government. You know, what we are experiencing now, this is the beginning of the 2023 financial crisis, which is going to be a lot worse than the one we had in 2008. In fact, it was the government's 0% interest rate policy and quantitative easing that sowed the seeds for this crisis. Of course, they created the 2008 crisis, and this one is even bigger. But I think they're acting quicker this time around. In the 2008 financial crisis, they raised the limit on insurers' deposits from 100,000 to 250 because it was 100,000 before 2008. Now it's basically unlimited. They're going to guarantee all the deposits, and this is a massive bailout for all the banks that haven't failed yet, but which were going to fail during the week and next week if the Federal Reserve didn't step up and backstop all these companies, or all these banks rather, by agreeing to take on all their underwater paper. All these banks are loaded up with long-term treasuries and mortgage-backed securities that are worth considerably less than they paid. They're now able to take that paper and give it to the Fed for 100 cents on the dollar, and that is a massive bailout. It is a return to quantitative easing, and the way Americans are going to pay for this is through higher prices. Inflation is now going to go through the roof. If you thought it was bad last year, wait till you see how much worse it is in 2023 and 2024.
Wow. Not the news I want to start a Monday off with, Peter. Thanks a lot.
Don't shoot the messenger.
I know. There's other people that need to be shot. But anyway, that's a joke, folks. That's a joke. If Jane Fonda can joke about murdering politicians, I can joke about shooting bankers, right? It's a joke. It's a joke. Peter, talk to me about the long-term effects this is going to have on the market, because all the analysts on Friday were saying we're going to see the market crash now within 60 days or less. That seems pretty crazy to me, but is it that crazy of a notion?
Well, look, if the Fed did the right thing, the market would crash. But the Fed's not going to do the right thing. It has no history of doing the right thing. It is doing the wrong thing. In fact, the reason the markets like the news, apart from the fact that nobody's losing any money apparently, is that the rate hikes are probably off. The Fed is going to stop fighting inflation. The Fed is going to actually go back to creating more inflation. We're going to get a resumption of quantitative easing. In fact, quantitative easing resumed today because that's the process that the Federal Reserve is able to bail out all these banks, is by printing money and taking their mortgage-backed securities and their treasuries onto its balance sheet. So the Fed's balance sheet is now going to expand and more money is going to be created. And so we're going to have a lot of inflation. And inflation is good for stock prices, right? It makes prices go up. So the price goes up at the supermarket, but it also goes up at the stock market. But the problem is, I think the prices in the supermarket are going to go up a lot faster than the prices in the stock market. So you may see your stock portfolio go up, but it's not going to go up as fast as your grocery bill or your electric bill or your insurance bills or any
Peter,
of the
and
other
for most Americans who don't have a stock portfolio, they could care less of what you're talking about. They're going to be totally, you know what, when they see what happens to the prices that they'll be paying in 2023.
Yeah.
That's the key here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the people who had money on deposit at this bank, they're the ones that should have lost. But because they got bailed out, everybody is going to lose. And when Biden says your bank accounts are safe, they're at greater risk now than ever before. See, the real threat to your bank account is no longer that the bank fails. The threat is that the value of the money is destroyed through inflation. Every bank account is going to see a significant decline in its purchasing power. What I would do if I had a bank account, I had any savings there, I'd take the money out because it's going to lose value. Buy gold, buy something real. But the riskiest thing you can do right now is leave your money in the bank because you're guaranteed to lose.
Wow. All right. That's a powerful statement. You and I may talk offline. I may need some advice on what to do with my money, Peter. Final question to you, real easy, because Joe came out doing what Joe usually does. Put the tweet up, please. He took no responsibility for anything in his inactions, because I know it wasn't any of his policy that set banks up this way. But I'll go back to 2008 when we saw those mortgage-backed securities fail and everything went to hell. We know what happened. I lost my shorts. So when he puts out this and says that the previous administration lays it all on Trump, it's his administration is at fault for the banks collapsing like this. Is there any validity to that?
Well, not really. And in fact, look at his own Secretary of the Treasury, Janet Yellen. I mean, she did a lot more to engender this collapse than anything that happened while Trump was in office. But I'm not going to completely absolve Donald Trump for the deficits spending that occurred under his watch. He was helping to create the deficits that the Federal Reserve was monetizing. But the real roots of the problem go back to the Greenspan era and the low interest rate policy that followed the bursting of the NASDAQ bubble in 2001. That was the Fed's major mistake. That's what inflated the real estate bubble. And then they doubled down on those mistakes when that bubble popped and they went to zero and they went to quantitative easing. And then they tripled down during COVID when they just went to QE4 and just printed money like crazy. And we're now experiencing the consequences. You know, the Fed made a deal with the devil back in 2001 when QE started, and it took 20 years, but the devil is now here to collect.
Wow. All right. So check your portfolio, folks. If you got anything, make sure you know where you're investing. Look at something solid, I guess, like gold, because, you know, I thought we got this fixed in 08, but obviously we did.
And we have protests going on in France. And we also have the Prime Minister right now live in Mississauga. I'm going to pick that up for you right now. He's speaking with firefighters.
As a way of encouraging people to
first
find
responders.
solutions that doesn't include that price. So we brought in a price on pollution, a carbon tax, as our opponents have labeled it, that applies to carbon emitting things like gasoline and others. But we knew, first of all, the experience in BC shows that if the carbon price is going to be effective, it has to keep going up. It has to continue to challenge.
This is live in Mississauga.
I'm going to bring in a new furnace. If I bring in an electric furnace, it might cost me a little more off the top, but because the carbon price is going up, I will save money over time. Investing in new technologies is really important. And knowing that that price signal is there is a huge part of incentivizing the behavior we want. I was down in Hamilton last year talking to the folks at DeFasco, where they made an agreement with us that they would shift off of burning coal to produce steel to going to electric arc to produce steel. So massively reduce their emissions. The carbon tax by 2030 was going to cost them hundreds of millions of dollars a year if they stayed on coal. So they made that change. But in all this issue, we knew that if we're just adding costs on to the average family, that's not going to get any support. So that's why in the 2019 election, in the 2021 election, not just the next election, but the last two elections, were fought over this carbon tax. And Canadians stuck with it and stuck with us. Why? Because the one thing I've been avoiding saying as the big reveal on the carbon tax is that it's not revenue that's collected that goes into government coffers. Not even for innovation into new technology is going to save people. The proceeds of the carbon tax are returned to Canadians. Every month here in Ontario, or sorry, every 3 months here in Ontario, 4 times a year, you get a check in the mail called the Climate Action Incentive. It's, you know, worth around different jurisdictions have different levels on it. It can be around $1,000 a year or so. And it is more than an average family pays with the additional price on pollution that we've brought in. So the Climate Action Incentive gives you back more money than the carbon tax charges you. What that means is if you choose to shift your behavior to bring in, you know, better insulated windows, or to ride your bike more and use your car less, or whatever you're able to do to reduce your own footprint, you're paying less of that carbon tax and you're keeping more of the more money we're sending back to you. The Climate Action Incentive and our price on pollution in the jurisdictions where it's in place, which is all of Atlantic Canada, Ontario, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta, returns more money in the pockets of the average families than the tax charges them. If you have a massive McMansion and an indoor swimming pool, no, it's not going to offset your carbon emissions. But for 80% of Canadian families who are not the wealthiest, it gives them more money every single year.
I don't
And
think so.
that's how we've been able to do in Canada something that very few jurisdictions around the world have been able to do. And that's put a price on pollution. And that makes Canada one of the world leaders in fighting climate change. And what does that mean? It doesn't just mean, okay, we're on the right track for fighting climate change and keeping our planet safe. Of course, we want to do that. It also means people are increasingly seeing Canada as a place they want to be, not just as immigrants, but as investors. Volkswagen just decided to build its very first battery plant outside of Europe in Canada. We've seen billions of dollars of investment in electric vehicles, in electric batteries, in critical minerals, the kinds of lithium that goes in every battery that we have in our cell phones and our cars is available pretty much 80% only from China. Canada has lithium. We are now building critical mineral supply chains because after having seen Russia weaponize oil and gas and natural resources in its attack on Ukraine and its pressures on Europe, people are realizing, oh, we want to do business, and we want our resilient supply chains to be linked to countries that we can trust. And of course, everyone trusts Canada. And that's why companies around the world are looking at Canada, because we have been investing in the fight against climate change. We have been innovating in clean tech, in green.
So I'm just looking it up here. And according to the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, the carbon tax is not revenue neutral. At least it wasn't in 2021. Here's the article from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, which indicates, as an example, in Ontario, the report that they have here shows that the federal government collected $218 million more through the carbon tax than it rebated in 2019 and 2020. So that's the most recent information that I have available here. So that means the government does collect more than it gives back through the carbon tax. And we're going to go to Paris, France, and other locations in France where there are protests because of pension reforms that are being rammed through by Mr. Macron in France. And there's also a garbage strike in the capital of France, in Paris. And people are out protesting that as well. Here we go.
These are the scenes tonight in the heart of the French capital, with French riot police being pelted with cobblestones, responding with tear gas and water cannon. La Place de la Concorde not living up to its name. In France, you meddle with the retirement age at your peril, as President Macron is learning to his cost. Trying to make the French wait another 2 years for retirement has produced a furious reaction, bringing thousands out onto the streets, protesting across the river from the French National Assembly.
La parole est à Madame la Première ministre.
Inside, there was more pandemonium. MPs were in a rowdy mood as the Prime Minister walked to the podium, jeering her and waving signs against the plans to change the retirement age, and singing the national anthem.
Aussi, sur le fondement de l'article 49,
Elizabeth Bourne fought to be heard as she announced the government would be forcing the changes through Parliament without a vote. The government has for now advanced its controversial plans, but at a huge cost, and exposed their enormous unpopularity, giving a boost to opposition politicians like far-right leader Marine Le Pen.
It's an acknowledgement of total failure for Emmanuel Macron, because it's his reform. He is the one who carried it. It was even the only one he defended during the presidential campaign, so it's his personal failure.
Hang on, not quite done.
Been living through strikes. Rubbish has been left to rot uncollected on the streets, and huge protests have gathered momentum. That unrest now looks likely to intensify. Dominic.
So a lot going on down there. Okay, give me a minute. Be right back.
The New World Order. Government overreach. The Great Reset. Mainstream media lies. Now more than ever, independent voices are needed. Donate now at freedomreporters.com. That's freedomreporters.com. Maverick News. The antivirus program for your mind.
Maverick News. Fighting for freedom.
So here's footage released today by the Department of Defense in the United States of that Russian fighter jet, two of them actually, that came into the vicinity of the U.S. drone over the Black Sea. The U.S. saying that the Russians came into contact with the drone, actually damaged it, hit the drone, damaging, I think, the propeller. Here's footage showing the jet, one of the jets, actually dumping fuel. It appears to be dumping fuel on the drone. There's the fuel dump. And this was supposed to be, I guess, intended to blind the drone. And then the reports are that a second jet came along. It actually came into contact with the propeller. And we go to color bars there because the video link was interrupted at that point. And the drone went down. It is now submerged under thousands of, down what? Well, it's at the bottom of the Black Sea is where it's at. Russia denies hitting the drone. Russia also has indicated that they may try to recover it if it is in the national interests or the defense interests of Russia. There are concerns that this could escalate tensions and escalate the conflict between the US and Russia. Personally, I think this is going to be forgotten about within the next couple of days. I don't see this escalating things, but it is significant because contact has been made. Nevertheless, it's a drone. It's unmanned. And I'm just checking some messages here from some incoming people. So I don't think this is anything, honestly, to be that worried about. It's saber rattling from the U.S. side, but I don't see it turning into any kind of significant escalation. However, Poland is saying that it is going to send fighter jets to Ukraine within probably the next week or so, I think, within days, they're saying. Poland's president saying that his country is going to give Ukraine a dozen MiG-29 fighter jets, making it the first NATO member to fulfill the Ukrainian government's requests for warplanes. So Poland's president saying that they will hand over 4 of those jets within the next few days, and then the rest, which need servicing, will be supplied later. And so the total number going there will be somewhere between 11 and 19 jets, so somewhere around a dozen. And that is absolutely an escalation, with Poland saying that the rest of those jets should be delivered sometime within the next month. And other NATO members are looking at this closely. The US, of course, has been asked to supply jets as well. So far, that has not happened. The White House saying that they have been looking at the possibility of supplying F-16s to Ukraine, but not so far. We'll see if Joe Biden shifts his position on this. Poland has also sent 14 German-made Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine, and Canada has provided 4 Leopard 2 tanks and is promising to send 4 more. That is escalation, but that's not because of the drone. And what else do we have for you tonight? We have that special rapporteur has been named by the Prime Minister in Canada to look into Chinese meddling in Canada's elections. And we have reaction from the leader of the New Democratic Party of Canada, Jagmeet Singh. who is also responding to questions from media asking about Chinese meddling at in a municipal election.
L'abordabilité et s'assurer qu'on rentre contre le gouvernement.
The next question comes from Marina von Stackelberg with the CBC.
Hi there. As someone who represents a Vancouver area riding, what is your reaction to the Globe and Mail story out today that alleges China's diplomats intervened in the last municipal election in Vancouver?
Yeah, it's deeply concerning. From what it sounds like, it targeted Kennedy Stewart, the former mayor of Vancouver. As someone who represents Burnaby, a neighboring city, the idea of a foreign government influencing our municipal election is deeply concerning. It should not be happening. And it's why we've been calling for a public inquiry. We want to make sure that Canadians have confidence in our electoral system because people's voices matter, their votes matter. And it matters because we're seeing the impacts of the decisions of government. The fact that we're living in a housing crisis and a healthcare crisis. The fact that these nurses that I met with today are worried about their future and that they're not sure what's going to happen. We want to make sure that these nurses have a bright future, that they're able to live in the communities where they grew up, and that they're able to work in a healthcare system that's there for them. And to do that, we need to have decisions being made by government that actually put people as a priority. And people need to know that their vote matters, and they need to know that their elections are free from foreign interference. And that's a big concern.
Do you trust David Johnston can do his job as special rapporteur, and will you accept what he decides should be done?
I've said, and I maintain that Mr. Johnston is someone of strong reputation, of integrity, and he is someone that's independent and nonpartisan. And so I certainly trust him to do his work. I want to make sure that his mandate includes all the information important to assess what the Prime Minister knew, when the Prime Minister knew that information and what he did about it. And that it includes really important recommendations about what we need to do to safeguard our democracy. But despite all that, I still maintain that we need a public inquiry because Canadians need to have confidence in our elections. And like I said, there's really important questions in front of us about affordability, about our healthcare system, about how we build a healthcare system that's there for everyone, how we hire enough healthcare workers and respect those workers. These are very important questions that Canadians should have full confidence their vote matters. And that's why restoring confidence in our electoral system is so important so people continue to participate and so that their votes are reflected in decisions that actually improve their quality of life and respond to the problems that they're faced with.
Our next question comes from Dylan Robertson with the Canadian Press.
Hi, Mr. Singh. Thanks for taking our questions. Just building on what you just spoke to about the integrity of David Johnston, I'm just wondering if you could comment on the Bloc and the Tories, noting that Johnston was referred to as a family friend by the Prime Minister in 2017. Mr. Blanchet says that he's close to Trudeau. It seems to be you're saying he's a man of integrity and that what the opposition parties is saying here doesn't actually follow.
Well, what has become really clear is in this whole very serious matter of foreign interference that the other opposition parties, and frankly the Liberals as well, have been more focused on scoring political points than really focused on solutions around protecting our democracy. And that's why we've been calling for an independent process. And while we still maintain we need a public inquiry to restore public confidence, to respond to the concerns that Canadians have, and to make sure that it's a public element so that people know what's going on, this transparency. I do, though, maintain that Mr. Johnston is someone of integrity, someone who's shown in his career that he is someone that is nonpartisan and trustworthy. And so I think that it is a positive step, his appointment. But I do want to make clear that I want to make sure that Mr. Johnston has a broad enough mandate to answer the fundamental questions that Canadians have. What did the Prime Minister know? When did he know it? And what did he do about it when it comes to foreign interference? And I still believe that Mr. Johnston has to launch a public inquiry to have that public and independent response that provides Canadians with confidence in our electoral system.
Thank you. And just on that note, is this process not a waste of time in that regard? If you feel that there must be a public inquiry, why not just jump to it? Why have the special rapporteur say what you want to happen already? Do you think it's a waste of time?
Well, I have said from the beginning that there should be a public inquiry, and I think that's what the government should have announced. They've announced instead a special rapporteur, and the person named Mr. Johnson is someone that I think is a credible person, is someone that's of integrity, nonpartisan, and independent. So I trust them to do the work. I still believe that what the special rapporteur should do is launch a public inquiry to restore Canadians' trust, and we'll see the work that's done. I'm very interested in the work that the special rapporteur does, that Mr. Johnson does, and I'm interested in the solutions to protect our democracy. That's what my focus is. And again, I will continue to raise concerns that we need a public inquiry, and we'll see the work that Mr. Johnson does.
This concludes our press conference.
Okay. So let's take another break. We'll be right back. Don't go away.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Very, very sad day today in Edmonton. Edmonton's police chief is saying the killings of 2 constables in the line of duty there is a horrific tragedy. These are the officers who lost their lives today. Constable Travis Jordan, 35 years old, and 30-year-old Brett Ryan were killed while responding to a domestic dispute at an apartment complex in the city's northwest. A young male suspect was shot and he is dead as well. A woman at the scene was taken to hospital with serious injuries. Police have not confirmed the age of the suspect or his relationship with the woman who was injured. Neither police or Alberta Health Services have provided an update on the woman's condition so far this evening. Now, there are people at the scene who are telling journalists that the suspect was just 16 years old. If that's the case, then as a minor, that person would be dealt with under special terms, special provisions under the criminal code for minors. And there are also people at the scene who are telling journalists that the injured woman is the mother of the 16-year-old who was shot. Of course, the 16-year-old who was shot, having been killed, so what I'm really saying here is that the release of the 16-year-old's name, the relationship with the mother. That's why we're getting this veiled release of information, is really what I'm trying to say. It's not because you're always dealing with minors in a different way than you do with adults. So Police Chief Dale McPhee, obviously very emotional, and the entire community is mourning the loss of these two officers tonight out in Edmonton. Another senseless tragedy. We'll get more information, I'm sure, in the days ahead. But anytime you're dealing with a young offender, even if they're deceased, the release of information is handled in a slightly different way. So we have to bear that in mind as we wait for information on the identity of the suspect and of this injured woman in Edmonton. I should comment, I think, too, on the National Citizens Inquiry that we ran earlier this evening. Riveting testimony from people who obviously have been impacted in dramatic ways because of the vaccine. Useful, helpful, revealing. That's what the inquiry has been already on this, the first day of testimony out in Truro, Nova Scotia. But I have to say, I'm extremely disappointed to see that there is like virtually no mainstream media coverage of this National Citizens Inquiry at all. I haven't seen even one story posted on any of the major mainstream media outlet news sites. I haven't even really been hearing much about it through independent media sites today or tonight. I thought it was important for us to run that portion of today's testimony. I think it is vital that that kind of information is shared. And I absolutely salute Preston Manning and the others who have helped to organize, coordinate, bring that inquiry to Canadians, make it a reality. It's vital because it's going to reveal information. It's going to give people a voice who would otherwise be voiceless. It gives their stories credibility. It creates a forum for discussion that otherwise would not exist. Even if the mainstream media completely ignores this, the information they are bringing forward will ultimately be undeniable, and it will add to the volume of evidence. And not just evidence, but just personal accounts for the record, for history, for Canadians, for future generations. I'm certain that in the years ahead, for future generations, this will be an era which they can look back upon to learn lessons. These are very dark times. And that's why this inquiry is so, so important. Well, the government is still actively trying to suppress information. This process forces it into the light. And that is where we will find balance. That is where we will find ultimately some level of truth. And it's important for us to make sure that is recorded so that the mistakes that have been made over the past 3 years are hopefully not repeated. We're on the way to getting to that place. It's just a very long process. It's frustrating. I think that the last 3 years have taxed people in psychological ways that are unquantifiable. Mental illness, drug addictions, death, suicides. The social costs are incalculable, really. We've seen studies conducted by social scientists like Dr. Jay Bhattacharya from Stanford University and the Great Barrington Declaration. The doctors and the researchers, statisticians who were involved with that research and those recommendations, I think also will be recognized through history as truth tellers, maybe even heroes, true heroes, who stood against authoritarianism, propaganda, the true misinformation of government. And this inquiry does get us closer to the truth, so I wanted to make sure we ran some of that tonight. That's one of the main reasons we set this channel up to begin with. And I have to say, I am humbled and grateful for the ongoing support that you guys showed overnight and through the day today, with messages coming in to reassure me that what we're doing here does mean something, that it is making a difference. I do get frustrated. I'm very frustrated right now. I see that things are not really going smoothly. I think we're winning, but we're winning in spite, I think, of some of the efforts out there. But as much as we're winning, I'm also concerned, and I mentioned psychology and psychological manipulation, and it's kind of coming from various sides. And there's more truth to be told in that regard, too. I hear still people shouting the word freedom a lot. I hear a lot of words and a lot of phrases, a lot of political platitudes. But these are broad words, and I know that when I'm hearing them these days, a word like freedom can mean many, many different things to different people. And it's easy to sell the concept or the idea of just freedom to people in a broad context without being held accountable for it, because people will superimpose their own perspective or their own worldview of what freedom is supposed to be onto whatever message of just straight up freedom is being projected at them by whatever activist, politician, protester, or whatever person is just projecting that to you. You hear the word freedom, it sounds very positive, but just look back through history at the number of political activists, revolutionaries who have used that word. Which revolutionaries have never used that word? I can't think of many. It doesn't matter where they sit on the political spectrum. They all want freedom. I would suggest to everybody out there tonight, assess, what does freedom mean to you? What is your definition of freedom? Then, the next time someone is selling you freedom, ask them, What is freedom? What do you mean by freedom? And then see if it meshes with what your view is. Because there have been so many revolutions, so many wars fought for freedom that I have to wonder what it really means to different people, because you see communists, fascists, straight up dictators, and politicians and bureaucrats pushing democracies. Well, what they claim are democracies. Is it neoliberalism? Is it libertarianism? Is it libertarian Marxism? Is it anarchy? What represents freedom? Is it lack of government, or is it heavy-duty government? What is it? What does freedom mean to you? Because I'm just realizing, not just now, but I've come to the conclusion over the last 3 years that freedom means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. It's a very all-encompassing term, word. Be careful. Be very, 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 very careful. You might just get what you didn't ask for because you didn't define the words that were being sold to you. I'll be right back.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals. Defenders of individual rights and freedoms. Credible. Trusted. Grounded in reality. Maverick News. Maverick News. Defending free speech. Free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
And now time to go back to the future, 1920 style. I love that old stuff. I love the style of the 20s. I love the Art Deco of the 40s. I love those old pulp magazines. I love that old-fashioned science fiction. Still holds up today. The designs, the lines. And I wish we were as optimistic and as forward-focused on life as they were back then.
The New World Order. Government overreach. The Great Reset. Mainstream media lies. Now more than ever, independent voices are needed. Donate now at freedomreporters.com. That's freedomreporters.com. Maverick News. The antivirus program for your mind.
Okay, folks, that gets us to 8:44 p.m. And what we're going to do tonight is we're going to wrap things up. I appreciate everybody stopping back in and hanging around, hanging out, fighting for real freedom. We'll do it all again tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, here on the Maverick News Channel, because we have the antivirus programs for your mind.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.